Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to draw a few just rectangles.
Okay.
We're going to put one line about a third of the way down on this one. We're going to put one line about 2/3 of the way down on this one. And then for fun, we're going to put one right in the center, like that. That's pretty much all the drawing you need. Don't make your lines don't make your boxes too narrow. Make them a little bit wider. You want to, because you're going to do a wash in the box. Even mine are a little bit probably more narrow than I want. There's all kinds of painting exercises you can do to kind of warm up and get your mind in the right place. I think really truly painting, a lot of painting is about getting your mind straight and ready to do what you're going to do. I'm going to use my brand new Da Vinci quill brush, and I'm going to start off with a little bit of yellow ochre.
So what size brush do you want us to use?
I would go with like a 12 or a 10, somewhere in there. Round, yeah, round, 12 or 10. If you have bigger's fine. This does not have to be. All right, how many of you know about the bead? Yes. Know about the bead?
What?
The bead.
Bead?
The bead. B-E-E-D. Bead.
Just watch the video on it.
Yeah, we're gonna play with the bead. All right. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to get a nice little puddle going of some yellow ochre, and we're going to start off. And I'm going to get my bead started. So I got a lot of water, decent amount of pigment. I'm going to start off, and I'm going to put in a line right at the top, and I want it to be pretty saturated. I want a lot of liquid. I want to get a bead going, but I also want a decent amount of pigment. So I'm going to charge it up a little bit. So if you don't paint at an angle, I recommend this exercise needs to be at an angle. We need gravity. So prop it up on a book, prop it up on whatever. I heard they had slopes here. I don't know if they do or not.
Tabletop easels.
Tabletop easel would be great if you need it. For this exercise, you shouldn't need it. You can just prop it up on something, give yourself a little bit of you need some gravity. All right, so if you look here, I got a little bit of a bead going, and a bead is this extra water pooling right here at the bottom of my wash, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this bead on down, and I'm going to paint into the bead.
Without adding more paint?
I'm adding more water. More water. And now I'm going to keep going, and all I want now, there's not a lot of room to work with here, so I'm just adding water on down to about right there. Now I'm going to throw in a little bit of alizarin crimson. I don't want a lot, just want a little. And I'm going to go right back into my bead.
So you're actually touching the bead?
I am touching the bead.
Are you mixing the two paints together before you do this?
No, I'm doing it on the canvas, on the paper, sorry. On the paper. Mixing these two just now. I'm gonna just continue to add a little bit of water. My bead is a decent size. If you look up on the TV, look at the bead for what I'm dealing with here. It's a decent sized bead. Look, I'm working at a really pretty steep angle. Look how well that works for me.
How do you get the bead? I'm not having a hard time.
Add more water. If you don't have a bead going, you're missing the point of this. You got to have a bead going. Add more water. Get your paint wet. Like I said before, the thing I've noticed about watercolorists is they're afraid of two things: water and color. Add more water. All right, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna right down to this edge. Now I'm gonna throw in right at the very edge here. I'm gonna take in and put a little blue, little marine blue. All right. Now, if you still have a bead, which you should, if you did this correctly, you should have ended with a bead.
What was the last one? Ultramarine.
Little ultramarine blue. Little ultramarine blue.
Oh, I use cobalt, but
That's fine. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Now, you could do this a couple of different ways. You could rinse out your brush and strain it like I just did with my fingers. I just strained it out, made it. My brush isn't completely dry, but what I did was I created a thirsty brush. Okay, I just squeezed it out with my fingers, right? Still wet. We want it wet. We want it kind of, you know, I shouldn't be able to squeeze water out of it, but I can feel it's still more, there's still water in it. All right, now I'm going to use the tip and I'm going to pick up my bead. And all I did was I used it like a sponge, and I just picked up what water was left there. What we're trying to achieve here is this gradation effect. See this gradation? See this? This is a French wash. This is called a French wash. And we are creating a little gradation. This is how you do a sky. Okay? And again, this is an exercise. It's just meant to get you flowing. Right? And that's why we have more than one box. Now!
can I ask you a question?
Yes, sure. Absolutely.
How many layers of paint does watercolor paper usually absorb? Is there a point where
it depends on the paper. I mean, that's largely, like I'll put it this way. If you use Fabriano paper, I think Fabriano will probably take a little bit more than Arches. Arches takes a lot, and it takes a lot of punishment. But it just depends on the kind of paper you're dealing with. And
Don't say Arches, just about.
Okay, so ask me the question again.
How many layers of paint will the paper absorb?
As many as you put down.
Doesn't it stop at some point?
Nope. It will continue. So that's one thing about, that's one thing about watercolor.
Yeah,
It's accumulative.
It just sits on top.
It just sits on top. The pigment will sit on top. And if you let it dry out and go back, you can keep going back and keep going back and keep going back and keep going back. I've gone in and charged as many as 10 times. Try it. And you will see, every time you do it, it gets darker. It will get darker. And even when you think it won't get darker, it'll get more darker.
But I think the challenge then becomes the whole luminosity thing.
So, yeah. So look at this. I want y'all to look at something here. One is, look at the pigments in mine and how, so first off, you can see the gradation. You can see it happening. Second off, it's not quite as dark a pigment as what you have. You got a really nice dark one going.
I have way too dark.
You got really dark. Okay. But you can see where I'm going with this. So
yeah.
I'm looking for some water. You got to have water in your wash in order for this to blend together. All right. So now we're going to come over here and we're going to go back to our blue, and we're going to use a little ultramarine blue. We're going to start off right below the line. Okay, right below the line. We don't want this touching if it's still wet. But if it's already dry, then we can go in and we can touch it. If we touch the wash that's already there, it will act like a sponge and it will suck the pigment up into the wash that we've already done. We don't really want that. I'm trying to get my camera to focus. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going light with this. I don't want it too dark. I want it kind of light, so I've mixed in more water. More water.
But you're adding more paint to it.
I'm adding I've just picked up where I left off, and I'm going in with ultramarine blue, and now I got a bead going. Look at my bead. And I will tell you, the more you do this, the more comfortable you'll get with the bead. You want that bead. Anytime you have a bead, I can stop talking, or I could start talking to you guys, and I could leave this here, and I can come back to it 5 or 10 minutes. As long as there's a bead still there, I can pick up right where I left off. But if you didn't leave a bead, and you walked away for a couple minutes and you came back, there's going to be a real line there, and you won't be able to do anything about it. You'll have to break out a scrubber and start scrubbing to try and soften that line up. So I'm going to go on down, and I just want to make myself a nice even wash. This is where you get to practice making a nice even wash. And I want to go from light to dark with my blue. Okay, from light blue down to darker blue. We're talking about values. So I'm going to go from a 1 to 3 value down to, say, a 4, maybe to 5 or 6 value down here at the bottom. And watch, each time I do it, I'm going to add more pigment.
Okay. But then don't you get a line, Terry, when you do that?
Not if he has the wet bead.
If you have the bead, you will not get a line.
Okay. And you're always going into the bead.
I'm always going into the bead. Always going into the bead. This is a great way to practice your washes.
Now, Terry, just for fun, let's say you were putting it darker and darker, and oh, we have no bead. Can we correct?
Add more water.
Just add water.
Add more water.
Okay.
You can keep a wash alive. Add more water.
All right. I usually run out of
Sorry, add it on the paper or the...
Add it right on the paper.
Okay.
Are we going all the way down this rectangle?
All the way down. We're going all the way down. The more, and this is a great exercise because the more you can control the gradation, you want a nice, even gradation all the way down. That is part of the exercise we're doing, right? I'm trying to create a nice, even gradation change. And when you can do this, you can make beautiful skies. Take a little bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to put in, I'm mixing a little bit of the burnt sienna with my ultramarine. I'm going to put in boat. I came in a little too early because my paint's still wet. You really want your paint to dry first.
Why is mine so granulated? Just the paint?
It could be the watercolor. So if you use pan paints or if you use,
This is Winsor Newton.
it's good. Well, Winsor Newton is different than Daniel Smith.
A lot of the ultramarines are granulated.
A lot of ultramarines are granulated. Very good point.
Yeah.
All right. So now I'm going to come in here, like I said, I mixed in a little bit of burnt sienna, and I mixed it in with my ultramarine blue. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to, I want a little bit more, I want a little bit darker. By the way, burnt sienna and ultramarine are complements of each other. And this is probably the most used complement color combination of all watercolors to use. It's one of the most common kinds. So I'm coming in and I'm going to do just a little boat, like so. I'm going to do a little bit of mast, you know, on my boat.
That's nice.
And then I'm going to come down here. I want a little less pigment, and I'm going to give myself I'm going to start with light, and we're going to go darker.
Still using
Ultramarine blue and burnt sienna.
And you mix that on your palette, so that's pre-mixed.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't hear that part. It's so cool.
What are you doing? Are you adding water?
All I'm doing is I put a little burnt sienna and a little ultramarine blue, made a wash, and now I'm just going right over the top of my other wash. And to be honest, I mean, if I'd have done this a little more carefully, this is not the, we're going to get better, right? I can pick up some of my harder edges with a thirsty brush. Notice I'm using a paper towel and my brush, and I'm pulling some of the liquid out of it, and I'm coming in here and I'm dragging it over my most hard lines. How often do you see a really hard line in the water? Never. So we want to pick those up. I got my brush dried out, so I got it wet again, and then dried it off and made it a thirsty brush. Now I'm going to go back in with a little bit stronger pigment. So I'm going to go back into my ultramarine blue and my burnt sienna. I'm going to mix them almost in equal parts. I'm making a very dark gray. I'm going to come in just like my boat was pretty much the same way. And now I'm going to come in. If it's too brown, put a little more. If it's too blue, put a little more burnt sienna. If it's too brown, put a little more ultramarine. And now what I want to do is I want to give it this little bit of a
Mine didn't look at anything like that.
there you go. What do you think?
What were you doing today?
Did you do a shadow of the mast? Is that what?
That's all I did, is a reflection of the mast in the water. A reflection of the boat and a reflection of the mast. You're doing good. You're good. You're getting there. This is not intuitive. This is why we do exercises, right? You have to learn this. But these skills that we're doing right now are the skills that are going to make you a great watercolorist. We're going to start our sky off. And we want the sky to start off kind of dark. So we're going to go in with red at the top. Some of this mixture I'm making. Don't make it too heavy. We're looking for tea consistency here. And what I want you to get used to is washing back and forth between colors. Color transitions in a wash. So as you can see, I'm putting in enough water and enough color to where I have a bead.
What are the colors you mix?
Right now this is mostly alizarin crimson with a little bit of yellow ochre in it. Not a lot. And I got quite a bit of water going here, so my bead is very visible. Now, because we're working at small scale and I've got a brush that holds a lot of water, every time I touch the bead, this brush pretty much wants to pick up the whole bead. You want to get a healthy amount of water and a healthy amount of pigment on there. So this is part of the challenge, right?
So we're trying to graduate it down, right?
We are absolutely trying to graduate it down.
With yellow, or are we going to another color?
We're going to go to yellow. We're going to go from red to yellow.
A different yellow or the same?
Nope, we're going to use yellow ochre.
Okay.
So now I started with red. Now I'm going to mix in a little yellow. Keep that bead going. Don't want to lose the bead.
What's the last one you did?
I started with the alizarin crimson and then started putting in some yellow ochre. And what you're going to see me do when I do the painting example of this is when I do my big shapes, when I do my lights, then my halftones, then my darks, I'm literally doing nothing but a big wash. And I'm using this bead. I'm going to push this bead all over the paper, and you will see that this is a very big part of the painting principle we are learning.
I have too much paint on the sides. Why?
It's just learning your strokes, right?
Yeah.
Learning your strokes, and you're not working at enough angle. You need to employ gravity. Gravity's free. We want to use it.
You just continuing to use yellow ochre?
I just used more yellow ochre. Now I'm going to start just going straight water. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit of my blue and go back into my wash, and I'm going to go down.
We're going to go from darker blue to lighter, or lighter blue to dark?
I started with light blue, went a little bit darker, but not much. And that's my sky.
So part of the blue is the sky?
Yes, I put a little blue right on the edge. It actually comes out a little purple. If you look close, it's a little purple. A little gray because it's a blue that I touched with a little yellow.
Now we want to get rid of our edge.
Yeah, if you have a bead, you want to pick it up. Go ahead and pick it up.
Was ultramarine the last thing you did?
Ultramarine was the last thing I did.
Only one line?
Yeah, it was pretty much like a line, maybe a line and a half. So now I'm going to dry, just because I don't want my wash to backwash. We have a pool of water that we are chasing or pushing around, and that is creating our gradation. At this point, let's start our next wash. And I'm going to start with we're going to go dark. So I'm going to start off kind of heavy. And here's another thing you need to practice. Practice hitting your value on your first pass. And remember, you have a color shift with watercolor. And knowing your pigments, some will shift more than others. Blue shifts less than yellow. less than orange, less than red. So your blues won't have as much of a color shift as those other colors will.
You mean when it dries?
When it dries, when it goes from wet to dry.
Okay, now do you have a bead?
I do.
Okay, so if it's dry, you just add a little bit of water and more color just to create your bead.
Correct.
Because I lose my bead constantly.
So it could be because your brush is too thirsty, your brush isn't wet enough, and it's picking up your bead. So I'm noticing with this Da Vinci, it's a very thirsty brush. It's a big brush, holds a lot of water. If I don't keep it saturated, it will suck up my bead. So I definitely want the bead to keep going. I have to keep charging it.
Okay.
And that's again, it's a skill. You have to practice it. And if you recognize you don't have a bead, then you have to take action. This is, you know, John Singer Sargent said, watercolor is nothing but a series of emergencies. That's an emergency. You need a wet bead.
You put a dark, and now you're lightening it.
Now I'm just adding more water as I go down. And I'm giving myself a, and you know, the better you get at this, you'll be able to decide what you're, you know, the more you do this, you're going to want to see every value in your wash. You will want to be able to discern a 9, a 10, I'm sorry, 9, an 8, a 7, a 6, a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1. Right? You should be able to see that. If you go 8, 7, 4, you know, that's a problem. It's gonna show up that way.
So you load it up with blue, and now you're just adding water to your brush?
Yep. I just add water to the bead. Each time I go in, I'm just adding more water.
You try to get the water.
And what I'm doing,
You try to get the blue out of your brush?
No, just adding more water. And each time I add more water to the brush, I'm replacing pigment with water. This is all about learning pigment to water ratios. And again, I will tell you, this is probably one of the biggest challenges to watercolor. It is not intuitive. It takes time to learn it. It takes practice. This little practice session that we're doing now, keep doing it. You should do this every day until you can do a nice smooth transition of this whole effect.
But you need to make sure that when you change colors, because mine's going up.
Okay, so 2 problems. 1 is not enough water, and 2 is no gravity.
Okay.
So if you, now, and you're going to see me later when I do some washes, I'm going to grab my board and I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to turn it all kinds of different ways because I want water to flow. I want it to move. I want it to take a picture. I've worked on boats my whole life in the Navy, and I know they are a lot of work.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. We're going to go a little. And what I want in this little wash that I'm doing here is I want it to go all the way to the edge. And I want it to get kind of thicker as I go down.
What do you mean thicker? Wider? Stroke?
Yeah, you see how my line started off kind of thin up here and got thinner or thicker as I went? Go in and darken it up just a bit. And watch what'll happen as you go in. If you, like I just did that and I just touched it, and this is still wet.
Right.
So it will, now I'm doing a charging effect, and it's charging that whole wash. But now it's the shape of my waves.
I definitely need to practice this one.
So you want it to be waves.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's what we're trying to create, little waves. Little waves.
Yeah, the paper's too wet.